Hello and welcome to Webisode 16, Interpersonal Effectiveness, Evaluating Options and Saying No or Asking for Things. This is our final webisode, so thank you for joining us. Woohoo! All right. So this webisode series is put on by Youth Eastside Services in partnership with the Lake Washington School District. Youth Eastside Services is the leading behavioral health service provider for children and youth ages birth to 22, and we serve families in East King County. Our services include youth and family mental health counseling, substance use disorder and co-occurring counseling, as well as community education and prevention programs. Kaylin and myself are on the school-based behavioral health team, so we fall into that last category, and we work in the Lake Washington School District. Right now, we are not currently taking any new clients. However, that is always potentially going to change in the near future. So just keep tabs. You can go to our website, or you can always give us a call to check in about other services or when they'll be available. You can also follow us on various social media platforms. So we have those listed there below as well for updates, as well as just other things that we're doing out and about in our community. If you feel like you need to reach out to somebody else and 911 seems to be not the right option in terms of the level of emergency, you can always call the King County Crisis Line 24/7. That number is listed there, or you can always text the crisis text line as well. That number is listed there. Or if you're a teen and you would like to chat and talk to other teens, Teen Link is a resource available to you 6 to 10 p.m. nightly. You can call that number or also go to their website and chat with them there. My name is Delaney Not-Nearest. I'm the school-based behavioral health coordinator. I'm a social worker and drug and alcohol counselor by training.
My name is Kaylin Griffith. I'm a behavioral health support specialist, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor associate and substance use disorder trainee professional.
Everything that Kaylin and I are talking about today comes from these two sources, the DBT Skills in Schools, as well as the DBT Skills Training Manual. DBT was created by Marsha Linehan. She is the go-to person for all things DBT, but if you are curious about what we're talking about, these two resources are what we're using. YAS is a DBT informed agency, and Kaylin and myself are foundationally trained in DBT. So for our agenda today, we are going to do what we always do a little bit of mindfulness. We'll get into the kind of the goals of interpersonal effectiveness, why we're here as the last webinar of our series, and then the two skills we're talking about today, evaluating options for saying no and asking for things, as well as always give you that at-home practice so that you can take these skills and use them out in the real world. And if we have anybody join us, a Q&A as well. This is week 16 of 16. We made it. All right, so our idea for this whole series was to give you a toolbox. DBT kind of has 4 different units. We have mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and the final one is interpersonal effectiveness. So if you've been with us this whole time, this is now your toolbox. It will be complete after this video, which, if you think about it, is pretty cool. Our idea was to give you things you can use in real life. I think of DBT as driver's ed for our emotions. You learn this stuff from Kaylin and I, and then it's not until you get out into the real world to practice that, like a drive, or using it with a therapist if you have one. That to me is kind of where the magic happens, but this is kind of the learning, the book knowledge of it. So we are doing evaluating options for saying no or asking for things, which is our final skill or tool we are giving you. All right, mindfulness. So I am actually going to stop your sharing, or you're going to stop it yourself. And we are going to do a Headspace guided meditation. I'm a really big fan of Headspace. We are not, sponsored by Headspace in any way, but it's a really great tool and resource. They have a YouTube channel as well as an app, and it is a subscription service if you kind of want all of the bells and whistles. But this guided meditation is specifically on being mindful in having a tough conversation. So I thought it fit well for what we're talking about today. So I will get that playing for us. And it is 4 minutes and 13 seconds long. So here we go.
Hi, and welcome to the Headspace Difficult Conversation exercise. Now, whether this is a personal conversation, a professional one, whether you're going to be having to bring something up that might be difficult for others, or you're going into a situation where you're anticipating somebody else bringing something difficult up. This exercise is all about grounding yourself, finding a degree of calm and clarity in the mind. Often when we're anticipating something happening, we get caught up in anxious thoughts, fearful thoughts. We might even feel very passionate about something, and it might lean sometimes towards sort of even angry thoughts. So it's really important that we find a way of just stepping out of the thinking, moving away from the very reactive sort of mindset, and instead moving towards a calmer, softer, more responsive mindset. Not only allows us to listen to the other person, but it also allows us to express our own thoughts and feelings in a way that hopefully the other person will listen to and respect equally. Just take a moment to get comfortable. If you can, find a place where you're not going to be disturbed, and just take a big deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe out, you can just gently close the eyes and just feel the weight of the body sinking down into the chair or the surface beneath you. And just take a moment just to notice how the body's feeling. Notice any sense of anxiety or restlessness, perhaps that feeling of nervous anticipation, whatever it might be. Just building up a picture of how the body feels. All the while, it's as though you're just sort of sinking down into the body. That feeling of the body pressing down, getting stronger, the sensation of the feet or the legs on the floor, getting stronger, the hands, the arms resting on the legs. And for a moment, just letting any thoughts go. So just allowing the mind to do its own thing. Just bringing your attention to the feet on the floor. Bringing your attention to the body pressing down on the seat. Knowing that this is not only a focal point now, but something you can come back to. Even within that conversation, just knowing you have a safe place to come back to feel grounded in the body. Noticing how the body's breathing. Perhaps the breath starting to slow down a little bit. You can just gently place your hand on your stomach if you find that helpful. Again, just allowing thoughts to do their own things, not getting involved in them. And then just bringing the attention back once again to that solid feeling of the feet on the floor, body pressing down against the seat, the surface beneath you. And when you're ready, just gently opening the eyes again.
All right. I don't normally do the ones that are themed with Headspace, so that was interesting. Yeah, Kaylin, how was your experience with that?
I was just gonna say that I want to say I've done a themed one on Headspace before, and both in this one and the last one, there didn't seem to be anything particular difficult conversations. And I was kind of like reflecting on that a little bit because he's like, let your thoughts come and go. So I'm like, okay, I'll just pay attention to what my thoughts are right now. And I think part of it is like you can have whatever you want on mind with mindfulness. and you
Yeah.
can listen to it, and based on however, like whatever mood you're in or whatever thoughts you're having or whatever's on your mind, you're going to interpret what the practice is a little bit differently. So like, because clearly in this sense, I was like trying to look for those connections. So I was trying to find them, and that like openness to them being there or not kind of might make me see things that are there or not. It's kind of like the idea of like a fortune cookie. Like everyone kind of assumes it does have something to do with them or their personality, or it's unique to them, even if it's kind of just luck of the draw or a random one. So I feel like these kinds of meditations are really good for like projecting other meanings on or whatever value you're looking for.
Yeah, and what's also interesting too is with the Headspace, you can customize the amount of time you want. So there's like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or 10 minutes. And so it's always interesting because I've done enough of them at different time lengths of like what they include and they don't include in terms of time. So that one for me felt like it was kind of like, oh, it's done now. Oh, okay. So kind of that, you know, you can do mindfulness at any amount of time. But I guess what was cool for me is that because I've been practicing or trying to practice it more, I was like, oh, that's it. Okay. Kind of wanted it to be longer. Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for your thoughts, Kaylin.
For sure. All right. Well, if my clicker wants to go forward. All right, so let's get going on our interpersonal effectiveness. This is the last unit of our module. So again, just to review our objectives or our goals with interpersonal effectiveness, the things that we really want to keep in mind or the things that we really want to balance meeting in our interactions, our objective, our relationships, and our self-respect. So kind of taking all three of those things and the associated skills with those. So objectives, we've got Dear Man, relationships, we've got Give, and self-respect, we've got Fast. We are going to, like with the last ones, build on those in this session, I guess, and think about when we can kind of use priorities or figure out when we're maybe unsure of what our priorities are. And this is kind of making things into a game. So it's called the 10-cent game or the dollar game, and you can use like whatever you want, but basically this skill, this evaluating options for saying no, kind of helps you know, okay, based on the facts, the things that are going on, the way that I can engage with this request, or if I want to say no, how can I prioritize my objectives, my relationship, or my self-respect? Or based on those facts, which one is maybe the best one to pay attention to? So if you're not sure what your priority is, this is a really helpful skill for kind of figuring it out a little bit. So have you ever had a situation where you really wanted something that was super important to you and you asked for it too lightly or quickly or took no for an answer when you really, really, really wanted it and you thought you deserved it? I can't think of something right off the top of my head that's really universal with this, but like I can think of occasions of like if you are out with your friends and you want to do a certain activity and no one else really wants to do that thing and you're like, oh hey, I'd like to do that thing, and maybe you say, if no one else has anything else to do, or if no one else has any other ideas, or if people don't know what to do, like let's go do this thing. And maybe you really, really wanted to go on that ride or go do that activity or whatever it is, but you didn't advocate for it enough, and the other people in your group didn't realize how important it was for you, so it didn't happen. And it's kind of a generic explanation, but it's as close to a universal experience of that I can find. And the other hand of that, have you ever asked for something so strongly that the other person couldn't say no because you just wouldn't accept no for an answer? And similarly, I can really think of a time where I maybe like dragged my friends with me to a store or like to an activity or to a ride at a fair that maybe they weren't super jazzed about, but I was so gung-ho about it, I was already like 30 feet off and they just so the idea of like noticing those instances where you maybe do get your objective or you don't get your objective, but the relationship suffers or your self-respect suffers. So thinking about those situations where it kind of is a seesaw and you kind of have to weigh one over the other, and knowing how intensely to ask for something or knowing how intensely to say no to something so you can meet your objectives in a way that's going to kind of balance those priorities. So evaluating options for either saying no or asking for something, basically the short and sweet steps are: decide whether it's appropriate to ask for something or say no to something right now. So in this moment, in whatever moment you're in where you have a temptation to ask for something or to decline a request, is that appropriate for that moment? Is that something that you literally can do or would not cause other problems? And next up, this is going to be where our skill takes place. Determine how intensely you should ask for something or say no to something. And 3 is use give, fast, and dear man as appropriate to kind of support what your choice is or how intense you need to kind of say this. So real quickly, just to talk about intensity, because I've been using that term a lot, what does it look like for someone to be really intense when they're asking for something or to really intensely say no to something? So I would say low intensity is avoiding eye contact, just of course, depending on your culture. A lower voice tone, so kind of more hesitant, lower, it's very quiet, maybe timid, hinting without actually being direct. And that kind of talks about the language that you use, the word choice, and giving in really quickly, whether that means when you ask for something and get a denial, or when someone asks something of you and you kind of want to say no, but you kind of just hint at it, so you end up doing it anyway. Whereas someone who is just demonstrating really high intensity in either asking for something or refusing a request, they're refusing to negotiate. So maybe there's a little bit of stonewall going, they're not really hearing you. They're using a louder voice tone. So they're being really firm, really direct, really being point blank about what they're trying to say. And they're not hearing the other person's ideas. So kind of maybe that like bunny character versus like a character like a rhino or something, where they're like really intense about the things that they're doing. And that really does affect whether or not you are effective in saying no or asking a request. So we're really taking in mind this spectrum of like our body language and the way that we are communicating, because that is the thing that kind of matters, or that's the kind of thing that demonstrates how much something means to us, or the intensity with which we need to kind of advocate for this thing. So this is just kind of a spoiler alert, but if we're thinking about intensity level, this is going to be the different kind of spectrums of like asking for things on a spectrum of intensity. So 1 is like, don't ask, don't even hint at the thing. 2 is like, you can hint indirectly, but you should take no for an answer if you get a no. Jumping up to the middle on a 5, you're like, ask gracefully, like go ahead and ask that, or ask it confidently. But you know, sometimes there's still going to be situations where you're going to have to take no anyway, even if you are asking really confidently. All the way up to number 10, where you ask and don't take no for an answer. So that is really, really firm, and you are staying on that same track. You're not giving in at all. Similarly, on our intensity levels for saying no, 1 would be doing what the other person asked without being asked. So that's just like, just do the thing. I mean, it's something that's not a huge problem for you. It doesn't create any extra stress for you. You are able to do it. Might as well just do it. A 5 in intensity would be like, you know, make sure you communicate you'd rather not. But if it comes out that you have to do it gracefully, do it anyway. And a 10 is like, hey, don't do it. If it is that important to you, or it kind of betrays these goals that you have that much, and it really is on a level 10 where you need to be intense about it, just don't do the thing. So kind of thinking about these score levels, our game, or the way that we use the skill, will actually help you determine what that intensity level or what that intensity score is. So you can kind of correlate it or check out this chart and know about, hey, this is the guideline for about how much intensity I should use in either asking for something on that left-hand side or saying no to something, which is on that right-hand side. So to really kind of prove this point home, or take it home, we are going to use a couple of examples. So we have to keep in mind that what works in one situation might not work in another. And I kind of talked about this a little bit in our Dear Man week, but just because we have these skills for interpersonal effectiveness does not mean that DBT has found some magic way to guarantee you will get whatever you want, right? So there are going to be some situations where you need to like kind of look at these like level scores that you get and kind of adjust them a little bit. That's going to be a wise mind adjustment that we're going to get to on a later slide. And you know, you really have to consider the context of your situation, because that might change your intensity level, and it might change the way you respond to the things that we take into mind when we contribute to our intensity level. So if you are saying no to a younger sibling versus saying no to your parents, that is usually going to look very different. I know a lot of people that can be a little bit more firm with their younger siblings, but hey, if you're talking to your parents and specifically denying a request from one of your parents, you might not be able to be as firm as you would with a younger sibling. Next, if you're asking your partner for something versus asking your boss, you are probably going to use very different intensity levels for those 2 different people, because you have very different relationships with them. And the last example that I have on here for when your situation might change this intensity level, and you have to keep this in mind, is asking your parent for something when they're having a good day versus asking your parent for something when they're maybe not having such a good day. You're gonna change how intense you are because it's gonna change your answer, whether or not they are having a good day, even if your request stays the same. So the 10 factors to consider, these are the things that will kind of beat into our scores. And as we're going through this, we're going to give you a couple of examples for both asking for things and saying no to things. But really what it comes down to are these 10 things. And if you are ever having trouble deciding, hey, do I want to say no to this or should I just go ahead and do it? Or do I even want to ask for this or should I just go without it? These are the things to come back to. One, the other person's or your own capability. Can you actually provide the thing that they want you to provide? Two, your priorities in the exchange. Are you prioritizing your relationship, your objective, or your self-respect? The effect of your actions on your self-respect. So like if you do this thing or say no to this thing, how will you feel about yourself? Will you feel better or worse? You and the other person's moral and legal rights. So do you or the other person have a legal or moral right to the thing you or they are asking for? Your authority over the other person. So are you in charge of the other person and do you have authority to tell them what to do? Or vice versa? Is the other person in charge of you and do they have the authority to tell you what to do? Is the type of relationship you have with this person. So like, is your request or is your denial appropriate to that relationship? Like if I had a friend who came up to me, I was like, hey, I would really appreciate it if you helped me like babysit these kids this weekend. I might be like, sure, yeah, you're my friend. I will help you out. My boss came up to me and asked me to babysit some kids this weekend. I might say no. That's not quite the relationship I have with my boss to do some extracurricular work on the weekend with kids, right? I need a break. And it's not super appropriate in that relationship for my boss to ask me to do more work on top of the job I'm already doing. Seven is the effect of your action on your long and short-term goals. So will refusing this request or will asking for this thing help you with your long-term goals or your short-term goals, or will it take away from your ability to meet those goals? 8 is the degree of give and take in your relationship. Short and sweet. Do you owe this person a favor? Does the other person owe you a favor? How are things going in this relationship? Where is the give and take? 9 is if you've done your homework to prepare. So do you know what it is that you're asking for? Do you know all that's involved in what it is that you're asking for? Or do you know what you're turning down? Do you know everything that's involved in what you're turning down? And do you have all the information you need to turn them down? And lastly is consider the timing of your request or your refusal. This one's the most similar to mindfulness in my opinion, but like, hey, should you say no now? Or might it be better to do it a little bit later? Or should you ask for this thing right now? Or might it be a little bit better to do it a little bit later? And that can kind of help with figuring out your intensity right now if you do feel like you need to ask right now. So to apply these things, first we are going to go through a couple of examples for how you might go through this if you were asking for something. And then we are going to go through examples for when you might want to say no to a request from someone else. So first, deciding how strongly to ask for something. What we are going to pay attention to are these kind of yes or no questions. So with capability, the question that we would ask ourselves is, like I said before, is this person able to give or do what I want? For priorities, is getting my objective more important than the relationship with this person? Self-respect. Will asking for help make me feel competent and self-respecting? Rights, is the person required by law or moral code to do or give me what I want? And authority, am I responsible for telling this person what to do? Similarly, relationship, is what I want appropriate for this relationship? Is asking important to a long-term goal? Do I give as much as I get with this person? And do I know what I want and have the facts I need to support the request? And is this a good time to ask? So if we are thinking about asking for something, the thing to keep in mind is we are going to count the number of yeses to these questions. And then of course, we can always adjust that 1 or 2 points for a wise mind adjustment. If you come to the end score with this and your wise mind is telling you that is not quite right, I need to ask more intensely, or maybe I need to back off a little bit, that wise mind adjustment, you can always use that. These are just kind of guidelines for how to start structuring how intense you should ask for something. So our example, when I was about 8, I really, my whole life. Let's not just limit this to when I was 8. I really wanted a cat. And there was one point in my life where so context, my mom is allergic to cats. So I already had some awareness that this was most likely not going to happen. But when I was younger, I really thought if I used my logic skills, I could convince my mom to get a cat. So I made this PowerPoint of all these animals from the Seattle Humane Society, and I put the pictures of all the cutest cats together and their names and like a fact about them. And I presented this PowerPoint to my mom to try and ask her for a cat. So capability, is my mom physically capable of giving me what I want? Technically, yes, because she was over 16. She was of age to adopt a cat and I wasn't. And even though she's allergic, if she went to the Seattle Humane Society and got this cat, they would let her leave with it. So she is technically capable of providing me what I want. So I did put a yes here, which is what is indicated by that star. And that's kind of a give or take, you know. Priorities. Is my priority in this my objective or my relationship? No, my relationship with this person is more important than my objective. So I'm going to say no to that. Self-respect. Will I lose self-respect if I ask for this thing? Not really, no. My rights. Do I have a legal or moral right to this cat? No, not so much, especially when my mom is allergic to cats. Authority. Am I in charge of my mom? Not at all. Is this an okay thing to ask in my relationship? It is okay to ask, but I said no because, again, I am a child and I happen to know that my mom is allergic to cats. So that's kind of a rude thing for me to ask in this relationship. Is this in line with my long or short-term goals? Not necessarily. I mean, I might have a goal of getting a cat in my future, but like in terms of my real long and short-term goals, not so much. It's not super related. Do I give more than I get in this relationship? No, especially when I was 8. My mom gave me a lot more than I gave her in our relationship. Did I do my homework? Yes, I did. I made this PowerPoint, right? I did put in some work into making informed this request. And is this a good time to ask? In general, sure. It was a pretty good time to talk to my mom about silly things that came to my 8-year-old brain. So with this example, with our 10 criteria, we got a 3 out of 10. That's not very high if we remember our intensity scale. So for another example, if we have a request, and we kind of reviewed this earlier in Interpersonal Effectiveness too, but if you want your teacher to review a test with you, is the teacher capable of providing you with what you want? Yes, they are. Is the priority in here your relationship or your objective? I kind of went with an I don't know because it's kind of both. Like if you have kind of a rough relationship with this teacher, a really good relationship with this teacher, it might not be that your objective is better or worse than that. And, you know, it's kind of give and take. So it's a 50-50 on that one. For self-respect, will you lose self-respect for trying to ask your teacher to review a test with you, or will you gain self-respect for doing that? Yes, absolutely. Do you have a right to ask your teacher to review a test with you? Absolutely. You have authority over your teacher to tell them what to do? Not so much. So that one's a no. But you do have the kind of relationship with your teacher to ask them to review a test with you. It is in terms, it is in line with your long-term goals. Give and take. You probably don't give as much as you take in this relationship, but it's kind of 50-50. It's probably about equal, hopefully, in a teacher-student relationship. Did you do your homework? Hopefully you took the test, right? You studied for it, you have questions about it, so you're prepared for a review. And is it a good time? I just went ahead and assumed yes. So on this one, we're on our example with the cat, we only got a 3 out of 10. On this one, we got to 7 to 9 out of 10. So again, if we are looking at our intensity scale on our first one, I may be going to hint openly to my mom that I want a cat, which I high-key did for many years while I was living here. I hinted all the time that I wanted a cat. And I would always take no, because at the end of the day, I didn't really have any reason to push anything but a no. That was totally fine as a response. Reviewing a test, I would ask anywhere in between asking confidently and resisting no, asking firmly and resisting no, or asking firmly, insisting, and negotiating and keep trying. So again, in that 9, we have our dear man skills a little bit, and that is really your prompt to be like, no, you totally have a right to use your dear man skills for that situation. That's super appropriate. And again, for this one, you've got your wise mind adjustment. So if you really don't think that based on those examples where we've got on our chart helps, then, you know, feel free to take it up a notch or two. It really depends on what you think is going on and what's going to work best for you, because at the end of the day, that's who we're working with.
All right, so we're going to do the same sort of thing, same format and everything, except for this is how to decide to say no, and how, or not how to decide to say no, how to strongly should you be saying no in a situation. So capability, can I give this person what is wanted? This is your capability this time versus in Kaylin's examples, that was the person you were asking. So can I say no, or can I give this person whatever it is that they want? Like, is it in my power to give them what they want? Priorities, is my relationship more important to saying no than saying no? And that's going to depend on the situation. Self-respect, will saying no make me feel badly about myself? And that's something that you should evaluate depending on what it is. Rights, am I required by law or whatever it might be to give or do what is wanted, or does saying no violate this person's rights? So like if my boss were to ask me something, I probably would be required to do it because it is my job. However, I have been asked to do things by bosses before, and it's not in my job description. And I've said, I'm sorry, that's not actually part of my job. I can't do that. And I've said no in that way in terms of thinking about rights. Authority, is this person responsible for telling me what to do? Again, if it's my boss, yeah, then I would probably, authority would be yes, but that might always be like no sometimes. Like say, for example, if Kaylin told me to do something or asked me to do something, would her authority be the same as mine? No, not necessarily, because we're colleagues basically at the same level of our organization. So relationship, is what the other person is requesting of me appropriate for my relationship to them? Similar to kind of like what Kaylin used in her example of like watching somebody's kids, watching your friend's kids versus watching your boss's kids. Does it make sense with the relationship that you have? Goals, in long term, will you regret saying no? That could be possible depending on the situation. Give and take, do I owe this person a favor, or does this person do a lot for me? Then you might want to consider saying yes or saying no, depending on what the relationship is. If you do a lot for this person, saying no would make sense. If you don't do a lot for this person, maybe saying yes might be useful. It depends kind of on where you're at. Do I know what I'm saying no to? Is the other person clear about what's being asked for? This is really important because if you're not sure about this, then that's when you ask questions. Like if Kaylin was like, hey, can you house sit for me? And I'm like, all right, but I don't know what that means, right? Like I could house sit for her, but that could mean she wants me to feed her cat. And then it also means she wants me to get the mail. And then it also might mean she wants me to water all of her house plants. And then it also might mean, all of these other things. And if I don't know what she's really asking, then I can't really evaluate whether or not I want to say no. And then timing, should I wait a while before saying no? So is it a timing thing where, maybe you do need to think about it and that's fine? Or is it like, I need to say no right now? That can be another factor. And then we will total the amount of no's similar to the other example. And then of course you can adjust based off of wise mind if you want to ask or say no more intensely or less intensely, depending on the situation and what makes sense for you. So in this example, the no's are the stars, just so that we're not confused, and the yeses are obviously things that we could do. So for example is saying no when your parents ask you to babysit for your sibling during their date night. So capability, do you have the capability to babysit your sibling? Yes, you do. You will most likely be in the same house at the same time. Priorities, is it a priority for you to keep this relationship? I'm pretty sure that's the priorities. Keep this relationship with parents and also with your family. Yes, that is a priority to make sure that this kind of still happens. Self-respect, in saying no to this, I mean, you could kind of guess maybe you don't want to babysit. And, for this one, saying no could be like, well, maybe I had other plans, or maybe you just don't want to babysit your sibling. This one, I think you can say kind of no, depending on you. But are you really going to lose self-respect in the long term? Like, are you going to regret saying yes to this to your parents or saying no? Kind of depends, but that's kind of up in the air for the example. Rights, do your parents have a right to tell you to do this thing? I don't really know. It's kind of, that's why there's a question mark there. I don't really know. That could be either or, kind of debatable. It's going to, again, depending on your family style and how that works. And then also some families prioritize taking care of other family members than other families, right? Other cultures respond to that differently. So obviously default to what makes sense for your culture and how your family and the dynamic of your community is. Authority, do your parents have authority to ask you this? Yes, they do, because they're your parents. Is the relationship, again, similar to priorities, important to you when it comes to your parents and your siblings? Yes, it probably is. It's going to probably cause some chaos if you say no, especially if you don't really necessarily have any sort of reason to say no. Goals, does this impact you in terms of your long-term, short-term goals? I mean, short-term, you might not want to, which is probably why that's a no. Might not want to, so that's going to impact your short-term goals. Long-term goals, I don't really know. It could be useful to have babysitting skills in terms of long-term goals and employment. But give and take, do your parents give more to you, or do you take more from your parents? Most likely, yes. Again, like Kaylin's example, our parents do a lot for us, so most likely we kind of should do that in that terms of that dynamic. Homework, this is in the sense of like, do you know what you're saying no to? You most likely know what you're saying no to when you're babysitting your sibling, because you've probably done it before, or there's just your parents would give that outline to you. But if you didn't know what that meant, so for example, like it would be in your best interest to like ask those clarifying questions, right? Like, okay, parents, where are you going? How do I get a hold of you? How long are you going to be gone? So that when you are saying yes to something, then you know what it is. And then timing, them asking you, I mean, if they knew you had a party or something that you wanted to go to, or an event, or you already had something scheduled, maybe timing could impact it or not, but it kind of depends. So that kind of gives us a score of like 2 to 3 out of 10. So there's not really very many no's as to why you should say no to your, or how intensely you should say no when your parents are asking you to babysit your sibling. So this next example is declining to give somebody your number. This happens probably a lot to a lot of different people at a lot of different times. And this is whether or not you should say no if you don't want to do this thing, right? So capability, do you have the capability to give this person what they want, AKA your phone number? Theoretically, yes. You would hopefully know your own phone number and you could give that to them. So that's why there's a yes there. Priorities, does this match with your priorities of this person? For the sake of our example, we're assuming you don't want to give this person your number because it's the intensity of saying no. So does this match with your priorities? If you don't want this person to have your number, then no, giving it to them is not going to match with your priorities. So that is why there's a star there. Self-respect, that could have an impact on your self-respect in terms of if you don't give them your number, that's sticking up. Again, self-respect is, thinking about our FAST skill. What is it that you value? What is it that you care about? And if you're sticking to those things, if you don't want to give this person your number, then giving them their number might impact your self-respect, right? So that is why there's a no there. In terms of your rights, do you have the rights to say no to this person? Of course, it's your number, it's your information, so you can say no. Do you have the authority to this person to say no? I'm going to guess yeah, because for the sake of our example, you don't know who they are and they're wanting something from you. So yes, in terms of yes, you can say no to them. That's why there's the star there. Kind of confusing in terms of language, but you have the authority to say no.
It's a no because it's no, they're not in charge of me.
Got it. That makes,
it's switched. Yeah, these are confusing.
So it's because they're not in charge of you. So you have the authority to say no. The relationship between you and this person, if you don't want it, then of course you can say no. So that would be why there's a no there. Again, it's kind of confusing because they're flipped. Does this match?
It's also about like, is it appropriate within the relationship? So again, if you're thinking that this is someone you don't want to have your number, I'm assuming it's not appropriate for the relationship for them to ask you for this. Well, it might be appropriate because people do that. That's how strangers get your number. But like, in this case, if you don't want it to happen, then you have put that characterization on the relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
Whatever.
Correct. Goals, does this match with your goals in terms of what you want, where you're going, what this person is asking? Again, that's a no, because you don't want this person to have your number. So that's not going to match the relationship that you have with this person. So no, it doesn't match your goals. In terms of give and take, does this person give more than they take, or do you take more than you give? Again, this, for the sake of example, you don't want them to have your number. So no. It might be awkward if you had their number and then they didn't have yours, but then you can call them anyway. So, okay. Homework, how is this one related to the dating or the number one? Like,
Do you know what you're saying no to?
Oh, got it. Yeah. Okay. I just always think homework as in like, have you done the research? And I'm like, what would you research about this? So you know what you're saying no to. You're not giving them your number. And then timing. This one again is also, is there a good time to say
I should
no?
have done an NA for that one again.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Well, but also the like timing. Like if you don't want this person to have your number, it doesn't make sense to like put it off. Like, like
Yeah.
when you say, hey, can I have your number? And you're like, well, maybe next time. Then they're just gonna ask you again. Like you might as well just say no
Yeah.
because you don't want them to have it.
For
So
sure.
if you don't want this person to have your number, all of these are the things that yes, you can say no, if that makes sense. So we have a total of 8 out of 10 versus the other example was a 2 to 3 out of 10 for the intensity in which you would say no. So we, again, use the score to determine how intense do we respond. So the babysitting example, we got a score of 2 to 3, which puts it at don't complain, do it cheerfully, and do it even if you're not cheerful about it, right? So our parents are asking us to babysit. We don't really necessarily want to, but we're going to do it anyway. So we're not necessarily going to be like flat out no. We're just going to be like, hey, I don't really want to. All right, okay, and then do it anyway. And even if we don't want to do it. Versus the phone number example of giving someone their phone number when you don't want to give them your phone number. We got an 8, which is say no firmly and resist saying yes. I think, again, for wise mind, you can always adjust the score depending on who this person is and your relationship with this person. By not giving them their phone number, it could be appropriate to go to the 10 of don't do it at all and don't even, don't even bother, really just be like no, and then that's it, and say no, say no firmly still. But depending on who it could be, you could say in a 9 in terms of like resist and negotiate, you could be like no, but you want to be friends on Facebook or something else that seems like a lower bar. But yeah, so that's how we would use it for determining the intensity of saying no.
My fingers got away from me.
That's okay.
But I spoiled the next slide anyway. So that is our evaluating options for saying no. Again, it's kind of just a guideline or kind of like a little game that you can play with yourself where you just ask yourself those yes or no questions and mark off the ones that you calculate your yeses or calculate your nos and use that to kind of look at your chart. And I think if you use that and you find your score and you look at the chart to get your score and you're like, you have that gut feeling that it's not intense enough, go ahead and listen to that. That's kind of your wise mind. So like Delaney was saying, if it's appropriate to the situation, go ahead and jump to that 10. But just keep that in mind. And this is kind of more a guideline to kind of help you figure out what you want to do. But our at-home practice, just like we do every week, choose a situation during the week that required more than one interpersonal effectiveness skill. So just like the mindfulness how skills, you can use all of the interpersonal effectiveness skills at the same time. So those really emphasize the give, fast, and dear man skills, but describe the situation. What were your priorities in the situation? Identify give, fast, and dear man skills or components that you used and how you used them. And then as well, just describe the outcome. Was it helpful? Did you feel like you got the thing that you needed out of that interaction? And just as a quick reminder, we do create a handout for every single one of these. It is on the Youth Eastside Services website at youtheastsideservices.org/toolbox. So if anyone is watching these in the coming weeks or months, you can always still go and find those to consume with all of these lectures. There is currently no one joining us for this live session, so we will not be holding our Q&A. And if you would like to reach out to us, you are welcome to, though right now just be advised that we are not currently taking any new clients, and that's of July 29th, 2021. Though we are hopefully going to be accepting new clients again soon. So feel free to reach out to us to inquire about services. If you'd like to reach out to someone else, we do have our crisis line information up on this slide. And as well, you can always contact TeenLink as a crisis line for our younger audience. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.